In a village where the baobab trees reach toward heaven and secrets hide in every shadow, 3 women's lives became forever intertwined by a power older than time itself. Before I share their extraordinary tale, I invite you to join me on this journey through ancient wisdom. If this story touches your heart as it has touched mine, please consider subscribing to our channel for more authentic African folktales that connect us to our ancestors' wisdom. Now, let us begin where all great stories do, with an impossible choice and a promise that could not be kept. The morning sun had barely kissed the horizon when McKenna discovered the empty space beside her where her twin babies should have been. Her scream tore through the village like lightning splitting a tree. It was the same morning that Zola found herself suddenly able to hear the thoughts of every creature in the forest. And it was the same morning that Elder Amara woke to find her wrinkled hands smooth as a maiden's, her gray hair returned to midnight black. 3 women, 3 miracles, 3 curses, all connected by an ancient spirit's revenge. McKenna was the youngest of the 3, barely 20 harvests old. Her twins had been born under a blood moon, already marked as special by the village diviner. Your children belong to something greater than yourself, the old woman had warned, but McKenna had dismissed her words as superstition. Now, as she ran barefoot through the village, her voice hoarse from calling their names, those words returned to haunt her. Her husband Kofi and the other men formed search parties, combing through the tall grasses and dense forests surrounding their homes, but McKenna knew in her heart that ordinary searching would not find them. Meanwhile, Zola sat frozen beside the river, her water jug forgotten as the overwhelming chorus of thoughts bombarded her mind. Fish contemplating the current, birds arguing over territory, monkeys planning their day's mischief, and beneath it all, human thoughts from the village, secrets and desires, fears and hopes. She pressed her hands against her ears, but it did nothing to silence the voices. Zola had always been the village's most talented weaver, creating patterns that seemed to tell stories of their own. Now she understood why. She had always sensed more than others, but this sudden gift was more burden than blessing. And in her hut at the edge of the village, Amara stared at her reflection in a bowl of water, not recognizing the young woman who stared back. For 50 years, she had served as the village's midwife and healer, her knowledge of plants and spirits respected by all. Age had been her badge of honor, her wrinkles a map of wisdom earned through suffering and joy. Now that map was erased, leaving her feeling adrift, untethered from her identity. Worse still, she realized with growing horror that her vast knowledge of healing herbs and sacred rituals was fading from her mind with each passing moment, as though youth and wisdom could not coexist in the same body. The village chief called for a gathering under the council tree. Rumors had already spread, spirits were at work, ancient magic had been awakened. Some whispered that the 3 women must have committed some terrible transgression to deserve such strange fates. Others suggested they had been chosen for some divine purpose. The women sat together, united by their otherworldly experiences, as the village diviner cast bones onto the red earth before them. "This is the work of Anansi," the diviner announced, her voice dropping to a whisper at the mention of the trickster spirit's name. "The spider weaves his web between your lives. 3 women, 3 gifts, 3 curses, 3 parts of a whole that must be reunited." "But why us?" Zola asked, wincing as the thoughts of everyone present crashed against her consciousness like waves against rocks. "What connects us?" The diviner studied the pattern of bones. 7 generations ago, your shared ancestor made a promise to Anansi, a promise that was broken. Now the debt must be paid. McKenna leapt to her feet. "I don't care about ancient debts. I want my children back." "Your children are safe," the diviner assured her, "but they will remain with Anansi until the debt is settled. You 3 must journey to the forest of whispers, find the spider's web at its heart, and each sacrifice your gift to reclaim what has been taken." And so their journey began at dawn the next day. McKenna carried only a small pouch containing her baby's matching bracelets, determined to find them at any cost. Zola brought her loom, miniature but magical, passed down through generations of weavers in her family. And Amara, young in body but fighting to retain her healer's knowledge, gathered what herbs and potions she could remember, knowing they would face dangers that required both ancient wisdom and physical strength. The path to the Forest of Whispers would take them through lands both beautiful and perilous. They would need to cross the River of Sorrows, navigate the Valley of Echoes, and finally brave the forest itself, where trees spoke in riddles and the very air played tricks on the mind. Their first night on the journey, they made camp beneath a canopy of stars. McKenna wept silently, clutching her children's bracelets. Zola, overwhelmed by the cacophony of night creatures' thoughts, wove frantically on her small loom, finding that the rhythmic motion provided some relief from the mental noise. Amara struggled to recall a simple healing charm when McKenna scraped her hand on a thorn, frustration evident in her now youthful features. "I was respected," Amara said quietly as they sat around the small fire. "My age gave me authority, wisdom. Now I look like a girl, and my mind grows more childlike with each passing hour. Soon I'll remember nothing of my healer's craft." Zola paused in her weaving. "At least you can have moments of silence. I hear everyone's thoughts, the birds arguing over which tree belongs to whom, the insects planning their paths, and both of your fears and doubts screaming louder than words could ever speak." McKenna looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "My children are everything to me. Without them, nothing matters, not youth, not special abilities. I would trade anything to hold them again." As the women shared their burdens, something shifted between them. No longer were they merely three individuals thrust together by circumstance. They began to see how their challenges and strengths might complement each other. McKenna's fierce maternal love gave them determination. Zola's ability to hear thoughts, even those of animals and spirits, could guide them through dangers. And Amara, fighting to retain her wisdom even as her body grew stronger, provided what counsel she could still remember. The journey to the River of Sorrows took 3 days. When they arrived at its banks, the water ran black and thick, with whispers rising from its surface like steam. "This river is formed from the tears of all who have lost someone dear," Amara explained, a piece of ancient knowledge still clinging to her memory. "To cross, we must each contribute our own sorrow." McKenna immediately fell to her knees beside the water, her tears falling freely. "Take my sorrow," she whispered. "I have plenty to give." Zola hesitated. Her gift had been a burden, yes, but what true sorrow had she known? Then, closing her eyes, she remembered the loneliness of her life before, how her sensitivity had always made her different, how even in a crowd she had felt apart. She let those memories of isolation form tears that dropped into the river. Amara struggled the most. "My sorrow is for what I'm losing, my wisdom, my place in the village, the respect I earned through decades of service. But it feels selfish compared to McKenna's loss." "All sorrow is real," Zola said, hearing Amara's thoughts clearly. "The river doesn't judge whose pain is worthy." When their tears touched the dark water, a narrow bridge of stones appeared, barely visible above the surface. They crossed carefully, the whispers from the water growing louder with each step, voices begging them to stay, to surrender to grief, to accept loss as the only constant in life. McKenna nearly faltered in the middle, the voices reminding her of her baby's laughter. Zola took one hand and Amara the other, and together they pulled her forward until all three collapsed on the far bank. The Valley of Echoes presented a different challenge. Here, every doubt, every fear spoken aloud was repeated back not once but many times, each echo growing louder rather than softer. "We must remain silent," Amara warned as they stood at the valley's entrance. "The echoes feed on our insecurities." They had traveled barely an hour into the valley when a swarm of thornflies descended, their stings causing painful welts. McKenna slapped at one and cried out in pain. Immediately her cry echoed. What kind of mother loses her children? What kind of mother? What kind of mother? The echo grew until it shook small stones loose from the cliffs around them. Zola, hearing the thoughts of the thornflies, quickly wove a pattern on her loom, a web design that, when held up, caused the insects to veer away. But the damage was done. The echoes had begun, and now every footfall, every breath seemed to trigger whispered doubts. "Your children will forget your face," the valley whispered to McKenna. "You were nothing before this gift and will be nothing after," it told Zola. "Your knowledge dies with each step, leaving you empty and useless," it reminded Amara. Zola, overwhelmed by both the audible echoes and the thoughts of her companions growing darker with each step, suddenly stopped walking. She placed her loom on the ground and began to weave rapidly, creating a pattern more complex than any she had attempted before. As she worked, she hummed a melody, not words that could be echoed back, but music that seemed to calm the very air around them. The pattern she created showed 3 women, their bodies formed from the same threads but each distinct. As Zola completed the weaving, she held it up toward the valley walls. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, remarkably, the echoes began to repeat the hummed melody instead of their fears, creating a harmony that guided them forward through the remainder of the valley. By the 7th day of their journey, they reached the edge of the Forest of Whispers. The trees here grew so densely that sunlight penetrated only in thin, shifting beams. More unsettling were the voices, not echoes, but actual whispers that seemed to come from the trees themselves, speaking in languages just familiar enough to almost understand. "The forest is testing us," Amara said, struggling to recall what she once knew about this sacred place. "It will try to separate us. We must stay together, no matter what we see or hear." They linked arms and entered the forest, immediately enveloped in green twilight and constant, sibilant whispering. The path, such as it was, twisted unpredictably. Sometimes it would split before their eyes, showing 3 different routes that all appeared valid. Other times it vanished entirely, leaving them to choose a direction based only on instinct. It was Zola who kept them on course. With her gift, she could hear the thoughts of the forest itself, not just the animals hiding in the underbrush or the birds in the canopy, but the ancient consciousness of the trees, the memory of the soil beneath their feet. "This way," she would say with certainty when they reached a confusing juncture. "The forest is thinking about a clearing ahead, a place where spider silk catches the light." On their 2nd day in the forest, the whispering took on a more personal tone. Each woman began to hear messages meant only for her. McKenna heard her babies crying, their voices seeming to come from just beyond the next thicket. Zola heard the thoughts of her village praising her weaving, offering her the position of master craftswoman if she would only turn back now. Amara heard the voices of all those she had helped over the decades, begging for her healing touch for ailments only she could cure. "It's not real," Zola insisted, though her voice trembled. "I can hear the forest's true thoughts beneath these illusions. It's testing our resolve." That night, as they made camp in a small hollow between massive tree roots, Amara's youth had advanced to the point where she now appeared no older than McKenna. Her hands, once so sure when mixing herbs or delivering babies, now fidgeted constantly. "I can barely remember my own mother's face," she confessed. "My life before this journey feels like a story someone told me rather than my own memories." McKenna, who had been silent much of the day, watching the shadows with desperate hope for a glimpse of her children, reached out to take Amara's hand. "Then we will be your memory. What you have forgotten, we will remember for you until this curse is broken." On the 3rd day in the forest, they found it, the heart of the Forest of Whispers, a perfectly circular clearing where massive spiderwebs stretched between the trees, glittering with dew despite the shadowy canopy overhead. At the center sat Anansi, not as the tiny spider of children's tales, but as a man with 8 limbs, his skin patterned with intricate designs, his eyes reflecting all the wisdom and mischief of creation. "The 3 who are one have arrived," he said, his voice surprisingly melodious. "Come forward and state your purpose." McKenna stepped forward first, her fear overcome by maternal determination. "Return my children to me," she demanded. Anansi tilted his head, multiple arms moving in a hypnotic pattern. "Your ancestor promised me his firstborn child as payment for the gift of fire. When the time came, he hid the child away and offered a goat instead. Did he think the spider who weaves the world could be so easily fooled? 7 generations I have waited, weaving my web of justice. Now payment has come due, threefold. But my babies are innocent, McKenna protested. As was the child promised to me, Anansi replied. Yet I offer you a trade. Your children for your gift. What gift? McKenna asked, confused. I have no special abilities like Zola or Amara. Anansi laughed, the sound like dry leaves rustling. Your gift is the fiercest of all, a mother's love and the courage it brings. 7 generations ago, I blessed your ancestor with the gift of courage to protect his family. That courage runs strongest in you. Surrender it, and your children will be returned. Zola gasped. But without courage, how will she live? How will she protect her children in the future? That is the nature of sacrifice, Anansi said simply. Nothing valued comes without cost. He turned his many-faceted eyes to Zola. And you, weaver of thoughts. Your ancestor received the gift of understanding patterns, in thread, in nature, in people's hearts. This gift has grown in you to where you now hear the thoughts behind the patterns. Surrender this understanding, and your mind will know silence again. Finally, he addressed Amara. Elder who is no longer elder. Your ancestor received from me the gift of healing knowledge, passed through generations, growing stronger with each passing. Your wisdom came at the cost of your youth, a fair trade. Now I offer you permanent youth, but the price is all you have learned. The 3 women looked at each other, the full weight of the choice before them settling on their shoulders. To save McKenna's children, all 3 would need to sacrifice the essence of who they were. If I surrender my courage, McKenna said slowly, will I still love my children? Love and courage are not the same, though they often walk hand in hand, Anansi replied. You will love, but you may not be able to act on that love when fear speaks louder. Zola closed her eyes, momentarily overwhelmed by the thoughts of every creature in the clearing. If I give up my understanding of patterns, my weaving, your hands will remember what your mind does not, Anansi assured her. You will create beauty, but you will not see the deeper meanings woven within. Amara looked down at her youthful hands. And if I accept this youth permanently, all my years of learning healing will fade like mist at dawn, Anansi confirmed. You will need to begin again, though perhaps with a different path before you. The women stepped away from Anansi's web to confer among themselves. The decision before them seemed impossible, each sacrifice cutting to the heart of their identity, yet necessary to make all 3 whole again. I will do it, McKenna said without hesitation. For my children, would give anything. Zola nodded slowly. The constant noise of others' thoughts has become unbearable. Perhaps silence will be its own gift, even at the cost of deeper understanding. Only Amara hesitated. My knowledge has defined me. To lose it feels like a kind of death. And yet. She looked down at her smooth skin, flexed her strong young fingers. Perhaps there is wisdom in beginning again, seeing the world through new eyes. They returned to Anansi, their decision made. We accept your terms, they said in unison. Anansi's expression revealed nothing as he began to weave a new web between them, connecting each woman to the others with strands of silk that glowed with inner light. What was separated shall be rejoined, he intoned. What was broken shall be mended. The debt of 7 generations is balanced by 3 sacrifices freely given. The web began to pulse with light, drawing something essential from each woman. From McKenna, it pulled a fierce red energy, her courage manifesting as visible strength. From Zola, it extracted a shimmering blue light, the pattern understanding that connected her to all living minds. From Amara, it drew a golden glow, the accumulated wisdom of her years as a healer. As these energies swirled together in the center of the web, a strange transformation occurred. Rather than disappearing, the combined essence divided into 5 parts. 3 smaller portions returned to each woman, not their original gifts, but something new. The fourth portion coalesced into two tiny forms that gradually took shape as McKenna's missing twins, sleeping peacefully in a cradle of spider silk. The fifth portion rose up before Anansi, who consumed it with reverence. "The debt is paid," he announced. "But in your sacrifice, I find generosity worthy of reward. Each of you will leave with something gained as well as lost." McKenna rushed forward to gather her children, tears of joy streaming down her face. Though she could already feel her bold courage diminishing, replaced by a quieter strength, the moment her babies were in her arms again, she knew the trade had been worth any cost. Zola felt the constant chatter of others' thoughts fading, blessed silence filling her mind for the first time in days. Yet she retained a subtle intuition, a gentler understanding of emotions rather than direct thoughts. Her weaving would never be the same, but perhaps it would evolve into something equally meaningful. And Amara, looking down at her youthful body, felt her accumulated knowledge slipping away like water through fingers. Yet not everything vanished, the most essential understanding remained, foundations upon which she could build again, this time with the energy of youth to carry her forward. As dawn broke over the forest of whispers, the three women began their journey home, transformed by their encounter with Anansi. They were no longer exactly who they had been when they set out, but neither were they diminished. Something had been exchanged rather than simply taken, a redistribution of gifts that bound them together as surely as Anansi's web. In the years that followed, their story spread throughout the villages, growing with each telling. Some said McKenna raised her twins to become great leaders, her new quiet strength teaching them patience and persistence where once she might have pushed them toward bold action. Others told how Zola's weaving changed, becoming less intricate but somehow more emotionally moving, as though she wove feelings directly into the threads. And Amara, they said, began her learning anew, combining her retained foundational knowledge with fresh perspectives, eventually becoming a different kind of healer, one who treated the spirit as well as the body. What remained consistent in every telling was the lesson at the heart of their journey, that sometimes what appears to be a curse may reveal itself as a gift in disguise, that sacrifice freely chosen is not truly loss, and that the connections between us, like Anansi's web, can transform individual weakness into collective strength. And in the quiet evenings, when children gather around the fire to hear tales of old, this story of three women who faced Anansi continues to be told, reminding each generation that our greatest challenges often reveal our hidden strengths, and that no debt, whether to spirits or to each other, is too great to be balanced by courage, understanding, and wisdom freely given. If this story touched your heart, remember that the wisdom of our ancestors lives on through the sharing of their tales. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that connect us to our roots and remind us of the magic that still exists in our world. Until next time, may Anansi's wisdom guide your path and may you recognize the gifts hidden within your challenges.